Pope Leo XIV, who has been in office for only a few months, is about to release his very first official document. This is not just a simple letter or speech. It is what the Church calls an apostolic exhortation, a teaching text that will reveal the heart of his vision, his priorities, and the path he intends to follow as leader of the Catholic Church. Around the world, people are waiting, some with hope, some with questions, and many with deep curiosity, because this document could shape not only the future of his pontificate, but also the direction of the entire Catholic Church in the years to come. The title alone has already sparked interest and debate. It is said to be called Delexity at first glance. It may look like a strange or even incomplete phrase, but those who study the language of the Church immediately recognize its power. The word Delexit means he loved. The T points to T, which means you. So the phrase can be read as he loved you. It is a direct echo of Pope Francis's last great encyclical. Delexit knows, which meant he loved us. This small play on words is not accidental. It shows a continuity, a desire to honor the legacy of Francis, while also hinting at something new. Pope Leo XIV seems to be telling the world, yes, I continue the message of love, but I am also directing it personally, directly, toward each one of you. This choice of title is more than a poetic detail. In the Catholic tradition, the title of a papal document is never random. It usually comes from the very first words of the text, and it signals the direction of the entire message. By choosing Delexity, Pope Leo XIV is giving a clear signal. He is speaking of love, of personal relationship, of closeness. But he is also situating himself in direct dialogue with his predecessor. He does not want to break suddenly from Francis's path, but he also wants to add his own voice, his own tone, and his own interpretation of the gospel for today's world. What makes this moment even more powerful is the context. Just months ago, Pope Francis passed away. His 12-year pontificate had left a deep mark on the Church and on the wider world. Francis was known for his closeness to the poor, to migrants, to those on the margins. He constantly reminded the Church not to get lost in luxury or power, but to be a church of the people, a church that lives with the forgotten. He gave up the papal palace, choosing simpler living quarters. He ate meals with the homeless in Rome. He traveled to places where many popes had never gone, and he always spoke with sharp words against injustice. And now, after his death, the world turns to Leo XIV, born Robert Post. He carries a record that already makes history. He is the first pope from the United States. This alone breaks a tradition of centuries. For hundreds of years, popes have come almost exclusively from Europe, especially from Italy. Now, for the first time, the successor of St. Peter comes from a new land, a different culture, a place far away from the traditional centers of Catholic power. His election in May shocked many and inspired others. Some saw it as a sign that the Church truly is universal, no longer tied to one continent, but open to the whole world. At the same time, his choice of name Leo brings a sense of continuity. Many important popes in history bore this name. The most famous was Leo the Great, who defended the faith in times of crisis and became a symbol of strong leadership. By taking the name Leo, Robert Post connected himself to this long line of tradition, giving reassurance that while he may come from new ground, he still honors the ancient roots of the Catholic Church. So here we are, waiting for his first document, and the Vatican itself is filled with suspense. Cardinals, bishops, theologians, and ordinary believers all wonder, what will this text contain? Will it follow the exact path of Francis, speaking mainly about poverty, social justice, and migrants? Or will it open a new chapter, setting a new direction for the Catholic Church under its first American pope? The anticipation is heavy because this is not just about words. Every pope's first document is seen as his calling card. It shows the world who he really is and what kind of leadership he will bring. For Leo XIV, this is even more important because people are still trying to understand him. In the past, he was not someone who sought the spotlight. He lived quietly, serving faithfully, but without the kind of global attention that Francis drew. Now he stands at the very center of the world stage, with millions listening to every word. In his first months as Pope, Leo XIV has already shown signs of where his heart lies. He has spoken often about the duty of the Church to remain close to the poor and the marginalized. He has reminded the faithful that the gospel is not about power or wealth, but about service and humility. In this sense, he clearly continues Francis's legacy, and yet, observers have noticed differences. Unlike Francis, Leo XIV does not use dramatic gestures. He is less theatrical, more quiet, more reserved in style. But this does not mean he is less determined. It may mean that his way of leading will be more steady, more subtle, and perhaps more focused on teaching rather than symbolic acts. The document De Lexit will be the first major chance to see this balance clearly. Will he emphasize compassion and universal brotherhood, as Francis often did? Or will he stress more traditional aspects of Catholic identity, making sure that love is always rooted in faith and the mystery of Christ? Many are asking whether his words will sound like a continuation of Francis or whether they will mark a turning point that distinguishes his voice from the past. As the Vatican prepares for the release of this first document, one thing is clear: the Church is standing at a crossroads. On one side is the strong influence of Pope Francis, whose words and actions reshaped the way Catholics and non-Catholics alike saw the papacy. On the other side is the need for Leo XIV to define himself, to show that he is not just an echo of Francis, but a leader with his own direction and vision. This tension between continuity and change is exactly why De Lexit is so important. It is not just about theology. It is about identity. It is about the face of the Catholic Church in the 21st century. The text is expected to be published in the coming weeks, and it will officially be the first doctrinal act of Leo XIV's reign. For the Catholic Church, a pope's first teaching document always sets the tone. It tells the world how he sees faith, how he reads the times, and how he wants the Church to respond to the challenges of the modern world. This is why the document is already being studied before it is even released. The very title, the very references, the very expectations surrounding it have made it a subject of worldwide discussion. But what makes this even more dramatic is the fact that it comes just months after the death of Francis. For 12 years, Francis had given the Church a unique direction. His papacy was not about grandeur or strict formality. It was about closeness. It was about putting the poor, the migrant, the suffering, and the outcast at the very center of the Church's life. He shocked the world by refusing many of the traditional privileges of the papacy. He lived more simply. He spoke more directly. He was not afraid to confront political powers, to call out injustice, and to stand with those whom society had forgotten. Leo XIV now inherits this legacy, but he also faces the question: should he continue it exactly as it was? Or should he adjust it to his own voice? This question is not only asked by theologians or Vatican observers. It is asked by ordinary Catholics all over the world, who want to know whether their new pope will walk the same path as the man who came before him, or whether he will turn toward new horizons. The very story of his election makes the situation even more unique. When the cardinals gathered to choose a new pope in May, many expected another European, perhaps an Italian, to be chosen. Instead, they turned to Robert Post, a man from the United States, a land that had never given the Church a pope before. His election was immediately seen as historic. It showed that the center of Catholic life is no longer limited to Europe. It showed that the cardinals were ready to look beyond tradition in order to reflect the global nature of the Church. For Catholics in America, it was a moment of pride. For others, it was a surprise that raised new questions about what this new perspective might bring. And yet, Leo XIV chose a name that brought stability and continuity. By taking the name Leo, he placed himself in a long tradition. There were many Leos before him, but one stands out above all: Leo the Great, who defended the Church in times of trial and left a mark on history that is still remembered today. The choice of this name was not accidental. It was a signal that although Robert Post came from new ground, he wanted to root his pontificate in the oldest and strongest traditions of the papacy. Continuity and change. Once again, we see both sides of his mission. But what about his personal style? Those who know Leo XIV describe him as calm, thoughtful, and less dramatic than Francis. While Francis often surprised people with bold gestures, Leo XIV is seen as more measured. He may not seek to shock, but he seeks to teach. He may not use theatrical acts, but he uses words carefully with a depth that invites reflection. This difference in style may become even clearer in De Lexit. Will it be a text of passionate appeals, or will it be a text of careful teaching, grounding love and fraternity in the roots of Catholic doctrine? This is what the world is waiting to see. There's another dimension to this moment. Every modern pope is measured by his response to the pope is measured by his response to the poor and the marginalized. Francis set the bar high by making this his constant priority. But Leo XIV, in his early months, has already shown that he feels this responsibility. He has spoken about the Church's duty to remain close to those who suffer. He has reminded the faithful that to be Catholic is not to turn away from the weak, but to embrace them as brothers and sisters. His words echo Francis, but the tone is his own. At the same time, traditional voices in the Church raise important concerns. They ask, how far can the Church go in using the language of fraternity and social justice without losing sight of the gospel itself? If the Church speaks too much in universal terms, does it risk sounding like a humanitarian organization instead of a community rooted in Christ? These are the questions that surround Leo XIV. He is expected to hold together both sides, compassion and Catholic identity, openness to the world and fidelity to faith. This balance is not easy. On the one hand, there is a strong desire for the Church to be present in the world, to speak to everyone, to use language that even those outside the faith can understand. On the other hand, there is the deep responsibility to protect the uniqueness of the gospel, the supernatural mission that cannot be reduced to social slogans or political programs. Francis faced this tension throughout his papacy, and now Leo XIV must face it as well. His first document will show how he chooses to approach this challenge. Already, in his speeches, Leo XIV has left important hints. At the recent World Meeting on Human Fraternity in the Vatican, he gave a speech that caught attention. He called for a pact of humanity based not on power or profit, but on care, giving, and trust. These words sound noble and inspiring, but they also raise deeper questions. What does it mean for the Church to propose a universal pact of humanity? Is this simply a social call, or is it rooted in the Christian understanding of fraternity as a reflection of God's love? Leo XIV addressed this tension directly. He reminded believers that true fraternity means seeing the image of God even in the adversary. This was a surprising and challenging call, to recognize the face of Christ not only in the poor and the refugee, but even in those who oppose us. This shows the complexity of his vision. On the surface, his words may sound like a continuation of Francis's emphasis on fraternity, but underneath, they contain a deeper and perhaps more demanding challenge to go beyond natural instinct, to love not only those who suffer, but even those who resist us, those who seem like enemies. This is not easy, and it is not a message that fits into simple categories. It asks for both compassion and faith, both openness and conviction. And so, as the Church waits for the publication of Dilexity, the expectations are immense. Will the document lean toward social themes like poverty, migrants, and justice? Or will it highlight more spiritual themes, grounding everything in prayer, doctrine, and the mystery of Christ? Will it be read as a continuation of Francis? Or will it be seen as the beginning of a new phase in the papacy? The truth is, it may be both. Pope Leo XIV seems to stand exactly between continuity and change. He is a pope from a new land, but with a name rooted in tradition. He speaks of fraternity and the poor, but with a quieter, more careful style. He honors Francis's legacy, but he also begins to show his own voice. Dilexity may reflect this balance, showing the world that his pontificate is not about rupture or repetition, but about holding together past and future in a single vision. Francis' pontificate cannot be ignored. When speaking about Leo XIV, for more than a decade, Francis set the rhythm of Catholic life. He challenged the Church to leave behind comfort and to walk into the places of suffering. He often spoke against what he called the throwaway culture, a world that discards the poor, the elderly, the unborn, and the migrant. His message was sharp, sometimes uncomfortable, but always centered on the dignity of the human person. He reminded the faithful that Christ himself was poor, that the gospel was first announced to shepherds, to fishermen, to those who had no power in society. By lifting up the least, Francis was trying to bring the Church back to its roots. He wanted Catholics everywhere to remember that to follow Christ is not to seek glory, but to serve. His decision to live outside the apostolic palace, to eat meals with the homeless of Rome, and to make surprise visits to prisons and refugee camps, all of this was not theater, but a lesson. He wanted to show that the Church is at its strongest not when it sits on thrones, but when it kneels to wash feet. This is the legacy Leo XIV inherits, and this is also the weight he carries. Every word he writes will be measured against the memory of Francis. If he speaks of the poor, some will say he is only repeating Francis. If he does not, others will accuse him of abandoning the path of compassion. It is a delicate balance, and one that only his own voice can resolve. The title Dilexity is already an answer. By choosing a phrase that echoes Francis's last encyclical, Leo XIV shows respect for his predecessor. He does not wish to erase the past 12 years. He does not want to appear as if he is beginning from zero. Instead, he wants to honor what came before him while shifting the emphasis. Francis said, "He loved us." Leo XIV now says, "He loved you." The change is subtle, but powerful. It moves from the collective to the personal, from the general to the intimate. It is as if he is telling each believer, do not just think of God's love as something